This is the story of Ethan, a paramedic whose life was a series of flashing lights and adrenaline-fueled races against time. He was a master of his craft, his hands steady and his mind sharp, even when chaos swirled around him like a hurricane. He'd seen it all: car crashes, heart attacks, the unpredictable tragedies that slice through ordinary days. Each life he touched, each person he brought back from the brink, was a small victory against the vast indifference of fate. He wore his uniform like a shield, a symbol of his purpose. To his colleagues, he was a rock, the calm center in every storm. To his patients, he was a beacon of hope in their darkest moments. But beneath the surface of this capable hero, a different story was unfolding. The calls that once fueled him began to haunt him. The faces of the people he couldn't save were etched into his memory, replaying in his mind during quiet moments. He'd arrive home, the scent of antiseptic clinging to him, and the silence of his apartment would feel deafening. The adrenaline would fade, leaving behind a hollow ache, a profound exhaustion that sleep couldn't fix. He started to feel a disconnect, like he was watching his own life from a distance. The man who could expertly restart a heart couldn't figure out how to soothe his own. He tried to ignore it. He threw himself deeper into his work, taking on extra shifts, believing that if he just kept moving, the shadows couldn't catch up. But they did. They crept into his sleep, turning his dreams into a highlight reel of his worst calls. He became irritable and distant. Laughter with friends felt forced, and the simple joys of life seemed muted, as if he were listening to them through a thick wall. His hands, once so steady as they intubated a patient, would sometimes tremble when he tried to pour a cup of coffee. The hero was faltering, and the one person he didn't know how to save was himself. One day, after a particularly grueling shift involving a young child, something inside Ethan broke. He found himself sitting in his ambulance, unable to move, the sirens long silenced. The weight of it all came crashing down, the triumphs, the failures, the endless pressure. He finally admitted the truth he'd been running from. He wasn't just tired, he was broken. The shield he wore was cracking, and he was terrified of what lay underneath. He felt isolated, believing that no one could possibly understand the unique burden he carried. He was a helper, a fixer. Asking for help felt like a betrayal of his own identity. But in that moment of raw vulnerability, a colleague named Maria noticed his stillness. She didn't pry or offer platitudes. She simply sat with him in the quiet of the ambulance bay and shared a story of her own struggles after a tough call years ago. She talked about the guilt, the sleepless nights, and the moment she finally reached out for help. Her words were not a lecture, but a lifeline. For the first time, Ethan didn't feel so alone. He saw that his struggle wasn't a sign of weakness, but a human response to an inhuman amount of trauma. That conversation was a tiny spark in the darkness. Taking that first step was the hardest thing Ethan had ever done, harder than any life-or-death procedure. He made a call, not to dispatch, but to a therapist specializing in first responders. Walking into that first session felt like surrendering, but he soon realized it was an act of profound strength. He learned to unpack the trauma he had so neatly compartmentalized. He learned that the emotions he'd suppressed weren't enemies, but signals his body was sending him, begging for attention. He started to understand that his empathy, the very thing that made him a great paramedic, was also what made him so vulnerable. The journey was not a straight line. There were days when the darkness crept back in, when the old ghosts felt close, but now he had tools. he learned to recognize his triggers. He started practicing mindfulness, finding moments of stillness not in exhaustion, but in intentional peace. He reconnected with hobbies he'd abandoned, feeling the simple pleasure of wood carving, the focus it required, a welcome respite from the chaos of his job. He was slowly, painstakingly, rebuilding himself, not into the old, shielded Ethan, but someone new, someone more whole. He returned to his job, but with a different perspective. He still faced the flashing lights and the race against time, but he no longer carried the weight of the world on his shoulders alone. He became an advocate for mental health within his own department, starting peer support groups where first responders could share their experiences without fear of judgment. He learned to set boundaries, to take time for himself, and to recognize that he couldn't pour from an empty cup. He was still a hero, but his definition of heroism had changed. It wasn't just about saving others. It was also about having the courage to save himself. Ethan's story reminds us that even the strongest among us can struggle. The weight of caring for others can be immense, and it's okay to not be okay. If you or someone you know is a first responder or is dealing with trauma and mental health challenges, please know that help is available and you are not alone. Reaching out is a sign of incredible strength. You can find resources and support through organizations like the National Alliance on Mental Illness or by searching for mental health services specifically. For first responders in your area, your well-being matters. Thank you for watching.
If this story touched you in any way, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Every single animation you see on this channel is inspired by a real-life moment. Real feelings, real lessons, real people. These aren't just cartoons. They're pieces of someone's life, brought to the screen to share a unique experience. If you want to see more true stories come to life through the magic of animation, then you're in the right place. Stick with us, because your support is what helps us continue to share these important voices that truly deserve to be heard. We're so grateful to have you here on this journey with us. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.